Good evening. Good evening and welcome. It's a real pleasure to be able to welcome you all to this special occasion. This is really a very indeed a very special occasion. It's in many ways a moment of real celebration of achievement. At the same time, of course, there is a certain tinge of sadness. I'm filled with anxiety because you all know what Toshiko has been doing here in the school, first from the time that she started some 12 or 13 years ago, and then especially the dedication and commitment that she's made to the GSD since she was appointed the chair of the Department of Architecture some approximately 6 years ago. It is customary for the chairs of the Department of Architecture, once they are in their final year of serving as the chair, to give the Walter Gropius lecture. And I'm very honored that Toshiko Mori is giving the talk tonight. I'm sure you all know that Walter Gropius was, of course, not only the director of the Bauhaus between 1919 and 1928, but also served as the chair of the Department of Architecture here at the GSD between 1938 and 1952. And so it's also interesting to notice both the continuities and the differences in terms of the approach towards contemporary architecture from the time of Gropius, his beliefs, his approach to an objective modernity, to the work that Toshiko does today. I was just leaving the GSD as Toshiko came in 1995, and of course I've known her for a long time, but haven't had the pleasure that many of you have had over the years to work with her closely. But over the last few months where we've had the opportunity to be together, I can't tell you how incredibly impressed I have been with her work, with her commitment, and with her thinking, both as an architect and as an educator. I'm sure you know that Toshiko studied at Cooper Union with John Haydock, and those of you who also were fortunate enough to meet John Haydock know that he had a very special qualities, many special qualities as an educator, but also very special qualities as an architect. I don't think that Toshiko's work quite follows in exactly the same kind of, I don't know, Michael Hayes, I don't know if he's here, he would correct me, but I don't think she has quite the same sort of what maybe I would call the mythopoetic relationship. Oh, you're there. Relationship to modernity. Her work is probably more rooted in slightly different directions of modernity and modernism. One that is today very much affected by the circumstances and contingent conditions of architecture, that of the site, its locality, its qualities, conditions, its sensibilities, its sensitivities. And this, I think, is also something perhaps to do with her experience of being both Japanese and also a New Yorker. She's not quite completely Japanese, and yet this combination of Japanese and New Yorker, I think, brings something very special and very specific to her work. When I look at her work and think also about her commitment and interest, for example, to interiors, the way that she's thinking, I often think of some of the films of the Japanese director Yasujiro Ozu. I don't know if you do know the films of Ozu, but Ozu made some beautiful films. Many of the films dealt with interiors of Japanese buildings and houses. A lot to do with the way in which one dealt with the opening and closing of doors, the interrelationship of spaces, their interior situational qualities, their conditions of light. And this is something which is very, very specific to a much more materially based condition of modernity. And there, I think, lies also something of the difference between Walter Gropius and, in a sense, this architecture which Toshiko has been involved with, which brings with it this, as I said before, this kind of sensitivity and of materials and qualities. It's also, I'm sure we will see, it's also interesting and ironic that then she has been involved in terms of her practice, working on the projects of many of the masters of modern architecture. Her work on the pavilion, the addition to the Martin House, Frank Lloyd Wright's building, the projects of Marcel Breuer, the projects of Paul Rudolph. So I think seeing also how she relates to this tradition of modernity and modernism is, I think, will help us understand how her position builds on this earlier tradition of modernism. As far as her work here in the school is concerned, of course, you know a lot more about that. I think that has been a very special period. I think she has brought a very strong and special commitment towards thinking through materials as a way of working. And I think also something that she probably learned from her time together with John Haydock of the organization and structure of the architectural studios as a kind of atelier, more like an intellectual salon practice of people from different kinds of backgrounds together, producing a new understanding, a more broadly based understanding of contemporary architecture. The book that came out of some of her research with many of you and many of the faculty, Immaterial, Ultramaterial, is a very clear demonstration of the bringing together of really thinking about sensory and haptic conditions of architecture, light, sound, smell, as well as the actual solid and more sort of contemporary materials of today. In her introduction to Immaterial, Ultramaterial, she refers to the concept of latency as something which is present in this research, which is really the possibility of the utilization of these materials, not as something which is immediately applicable, but something which is in many ways yet to come. There is a dimension of future thinking in terms of the use of these materials. And in that sense, her reference to whether it's textiles or new types of materials is also not dissimilar to perhaps some of the work of the Italian philosopher Gianni Vattimo in his concept of weak thought, weak thinking, in a way which is open to new forms of sensibility, which again is also different from the objectivity of the earlier tradition of modernism by opening it to multiple perceptions and multiple dimensions. I am certainly going to miss her as the chair, but I know that she will be here with us doing lots and lots of things with the school, and I'm certainly looking forward to this, what promises to be a wonderful presentation tonight. Would you please join me in welcoming Toshiko Mori.
Thank you, Moisen, very much for a wonderful introduction. And thank you, all of you, for last 6 years working with me. This place doesn't work as just individual. It's just a one big conglomerate. I call it like a QE2. It's just one big ship that everybody works together. And my regret is really not to be able to serve under you longer, Moisen. I had to serve under 3 presidents and 3 deans in 6 years, under the most turbulent time at Harvard. And it would have been a pleasure, but I know the school is for a good start, for an amazing era. And so in a sense, I think I give presentation tonight in celebration of new era to come. And as my title says, it's reflection on the effects of architecture. This evening in particular, I would like to deliver a lecture of my thoughts focused on fundamental aspects of discipline of architecture and the role of architecture in our society. Reflection is an instant of reflecting the return of light or sound waves from a surface, the production of an image as if by my mirror. Could be a little bit lighter so people don't fall asleep. A thought in an idea or opinion formed or a remark made as a result of meditation. A shiny surface of an automobile body reflects sinuous light. This illusion exists millimeter above its actual surface. Automobile designers call the design process accelerating sections. Me and Winter question automobile designers incessantly about getting this quote. That produces this effect. The transitory ghost of light gleaming on the surface sets the iconic image of a fast-moving object. The effect is sensational for automobiles precisely because they are moving at fast speed. Reflections are transitory and ephemeral that catches a glimpse of moments and insights. Well, there will be a quiz about which buildings these images belong to, by the way, in any case. It is also suspended slightly above the reality and materiality, creating a thin layer for imaginations to enter. If observation is a patient and precise practice to uncover a true nature, reflection is a liberating thought process revealing latent virtuality. When the objects are immobile and rooted, such as buildings and cities, reflective thoughts reside closer to the quotidian. The sensational revelations become slower and embedded to the context, narrative, and content existing just beneath its surface. Reflections on architecture is therefore complex, its effects released with time instead of speed. Interweaving refractive effect to outside world and reflective one internally affect daily life, we experience continuum and contingency of inner and outer world together. It is not only the accessibility of media, but it is proven that cognitively seeing is an active agent in brain function, which consists nearly about 40% of its function, that connects experience, memory, and empathy in our work and life. There will also a quiz about who these characters are in my images. The effect is an execution, a performance, a realization, an operation, manifestation, expression, a sign. It is a result, a consequence, an outcome, an impression left on the mind, a sensation produced, or a power to produce results, a consequence, an intended purpose, or a meaning and purport. In effect, work of architect is a visual manifestation of state of our society and civilization. What we choose and how we manifest and why we do it is, of course, becomes the question. When I think of effect of architecture in contemporary society, I wanted to go beyond the standard binary formula of cause and effect exemplified by Newtonian logic. I like to read theoretical physics to understand the relationship between concept and percept and how humankind makes a giant leap into a new discovery of state of universe through a process of speculation and observation. Theoretical physicists try to look at invisible phenomena intrinsically related to architecture such as gravity, space, light, and dimensions. And their process is perhaps more related to speculative philosophy through observation and theorizing rather than that of a traditional scientific process requiring visible proof or an evidence. In my limited capacity, I am probably dealing with it at a metaphorical level, but the fundamental fascination for me that relates to the discipline of architecture is that the essence of their work in the way in which they think and observe to revolutionize the idea about universe. Through a careful and precise observation of phenomena, they arrive at a completely new definition of the universe. An architect's talent and craft is based also on power of imagination and acuity of observation. Le Corbusier famously said that architecture is art of approximation. How closely can we approximate to identify the problem, and how close can we get to the solution? The quest for this process is what is so difficult and at the same time so exhilarating about work of architects. Large Hadron Collider ready for operation this summer will reveal the secret of the universe, but it was only made possible because of massive collaborative work on observation and speculation and calculation by theoretical physicists. Of course, the metrics or evidence is much different for architects. We operate on the basis of quality as well as quantity for our effectiveness in our work. In the book, The Invisible Century, Richard Planek describes origin of two new disciplines of sciences formulated at the beginning of the 20th century, cosmology and psychoanalysis, the story of Einstein and Freud, and the investigation of relativity and unconscious, which both lack the traditional visible evidence. Quote, the difference between our vision of the universe and its 19th century counterpart has turned out to be not a question of what had distinguished each previous era from a preceding one for nearly 300 years, of seeing farther or deeper, of seeing more, of perspective, how much we see. Instead, it is a question of seeing itself, of perception, of how we see. It is also then a question of thinking about seeing, of conception, of how we think about how we see. As much as any discovery, this is what has changed the way we try to make sense of our existence in the 21st century. The way we struggle to investigate our circumstances as sentient creatures in a particular setting. Who are these creatures? What is the setting? It is a new means of discovery, the significance of which, 100 years later, we are still only beginning to comprehend, that there is more to the universe than we would ever find if all we ever did was look. End of quote. In terms of defining effect as such, what distinguishes the modern and contemporary from the 19th century thought pattern is a recognition of the existence of parallel universe, which really is about issues of relativity. It's changed from a simple linear formula of cause and effect to the relationships between the dichotomy of space and time, conscious and unconscious, energy and matter, the invisible and the visible. Our life consists no longer of linear sequential life, but it is a simultaneous traversing between multiple parallel strands: ethnicity, religion, nationality, race, gender, music, science, food, politics, health, economy, technology, arts, and etc. We don't even go from one territory to another. We often reside in several domains at the same time. Our world is more accessible and inclusive because of this parallel state. Powers can be more decentralized and distributed without being out of control. It can be coordinated and orchestrated through varied collaboration that blurs boundaries and easy classifications. Sydney, where the cities, surfers, nature, and swimmers all coexist. There are instances of much more miserable conditions, but there is amazing coexistence of conditions in the world today. The knowledge and wealth can be better distributed or should be distributed, create a fluid territory of shared values. If we can imagine this parallel model in our discourse, we can jump from one discipline to the other, collaborating and connecting at various points to weave together a totally different territory of knowledge. Digital technology is helping to increase our capacity to communicate, to exchange ideas more democratically. There will be many more choices and hybridization of disciplines that we have now. This is an opportunity for architects, designers, planners, and designers to gain multiple roles in our society. Architecture can be said that it mirrors the society at large, but it is never a flat and clear one. It is more like lens of refraction that creates a mirage of imagery, sometimes skewed and sometimes unflattering. It can be called a spectacle due to its powerful visual representation. Guy Debord predicted in the Society of Spectacle in 1967, quote, "The spectacle is the heir to all the weakness of the project of Western philosophy, which was an attempt to understand activity by means of the categories of vision. Indeed, the spectacle responses on an incessant deployment of a very technical rationality to which the philosophical tradition can give rise. So far from realizing philosophy, the spectacle philosophizes reality and turns the material life of everyone into a universe of speculation." In the last decade, this spectacle effect had a global impact. From Bilbao to Berlin to Barcelona, Paris, London, New York, Milwaukee, Munich, Beijing, Shanghai, Tokyo, it took the world by storm. What is significant is that all of this got swallowed up in consumption economy of entertainment, business, and commerce. The positive outcome is that it started an economic resurgence of the region referred as Bilbao effect. Especially since 9/11, robust visions imagined by architects worldwide provided an opportunity to renew the faith for reimagining large and extra-large projects. They emerged with full force. Architecture became the symbol for hope for the future, renewal, and new branding device for cities worldwide. The negative side is described by Edward Heathcote of Financial Times in his recent article, Conspicuous Construction. Quote, "Architectural culture has become a simple language of symbols and signatures, and while some, perhaps many, of these proposed buildings may be masterpieces, you can't help but fear an emptiness inside them. The hollowed-out feeling is a collapse of ideology, the dearth of ideas beyond the formal and the physical. Buildings, once they descend into theatrical shapes, lose their soul, their connections with a broader world, and they have nothing to say but just look at me." End of quote. The backlash of Bilbao effect can also be observed in a recent economic crisis where homes were turned into commodity assets, becoming the victim of volatile financial speculation. Another question is the examination of the state of technology and its effect in architecture. 60 years after the publication of Mechanization Takes Command by Siegfried Gideon, if we can think of our lives less affected by the tyranny of mechanical clock and think the entire world as a compass rather than a clock, what will we do? The question we should be asking instead is not what time is it and what is next, but where are we and where are we heading? If we ground ourselves in orienting and locating instead of measuring against time, we should be able to gain more clarity in our head. Concentration and focus are the only human actions that can beat time. I'm going to repeat to GST students. This is for time management. Concentration and focus are the only human actions that can be timed. The orientation and locations through coordinates in our world is what comprises context in our time. It makes us locate in time and space, in the specific locale as well as within a large global context. If that were the case, the idea of context itself needs to be redefined. It is beyond the immediate physical surroundings. It needs to include its history, narrative, politics, climate, economy, and culture. The context of sight is an intersection of various forces, both visible and invisible. It is a rich, thick, and fertile territory we discover ourselves to invest intensively into architecture. In an operative sense, I'd like to introduce a list that outlines a general shift, in fact, a slow but a definitive shift in thinking process, as I mentioned, sequential to parallel, like interweaving of many different disciplines at different points, from linear to lateral, from singular line to much more interconnecting of different strands to create a fabric of society, both metaphorically, literally, from very rigid way of thinking of rigid structures to much more elastic way of thinking of form and conditions, and from static to dynamic, meaning that a building is much more dynamic enterprise of a different type of monumentality, in this case inflatable using air as a force, from solid to thinking to more porous conditions. Corbusier in Buenos Aires, some of you have visited, has a Dumoulin in different conditions, and conditions more resistant to resilience in case that things that yield not only to resist, that materials and structures that work with dynamic forces that yield and become resilient. Concentration to distribution, in this case, concentrating solar energy to distribute to the entire Paella storage project in Barcelona, and from exclusive to being inclusive, from separation to connection, integration, and from isolation to integration, from heavy to light, and division of labor to multitasking buildings, Victor Lundy buildings in Florida in 50s, and then Toyo Ito's MediaTek multitasking buildings. And I would also like to introduce a pair or set of conditions where reciprocal mutual exchange exists that creates fluid and productive coexistence. These conditions can flip very easily depending on the context and the point of view. They are somewhat like those bank ads in airports. Fast and slow, going back and forth, fast or slow. Extraordinary, ordinary. Which is extraordinary, which is ordinary. Global intelligence and local smart. Which is really intelligent, which is really smart. Which is more global, which is more local. Manual, mechanical, digital, in a way you build manually, mechanically, or digitally, or do they flip back and forth? High-tech, low-tech, no-tech. Do they actually go back and forth and then combine each other? Within my body of work, I'd like to introduce projects with 6 themes and topics that I am currently occupied with. The territory of reflection I'm most interested is in the ambiguous zone between familiar and unfamiliar, the subliminal area where certain codes are broken to assume something new, to make a claim without mutation or creating a derivative. Yet within the creative process, the connections and references are made and reconciled, traces, strategy, and intentions are clearly laid out. History is embodied instead of erased by working through a complex set of circumstances and issues. One is a relationship between monumentality and scale, with intense narrative of historical legacy or latent message within a fragile political framework. 2, a problem of defying gravity, suspension, displacement of volume. 3, rethinking of housing program and type in shifting cultural context, an idea about flexibility and loose fit. 4, narrative in architecture dealing with artistic or literary origins. 5, textile tectonics, a research and new ideas for thinking about architecture through material and fabrication. And the 6, the last one, is sustainable infrastructure, technical buildings that deal with forces of nature, ecology, and energy. I forgot one is a collaboration. Of course, this is the most important last element of all the changing trends is, in fact, is a collaboration that's required to work together with many people, in fact, to close the circle of work together. The first project is a visitor center. It's orientation exhibition for Darby Martin House, a residential compound built by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1906 in Buffalo, New York. Design strategy creates a dialogue with Martin House through contrast rather than imitation. It is a very small pavilion compared to his compound, and Buffalo at that time was considered the 8th largest city in the United States. Darby Martin was a Bill Gates of his time. This was the largest house constructed. So if you look at the site, it looks like a very large giant within the context of a site, which is designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. So my pavilion is very, very diminutive in relationship and a very low slung. And interpreting Wright's lifelong attention to exploring materials, technology, techniques, I wanted to actually reinstate the issue of organic architecture through interpretation into technological advances, of course, sustainability and all of that. It's perhaps the most difficult commission for any architect to do is to build next to a masterpiece by modern masters, of all people, Frank Lloyd Wright. And this was a competition. I think other members who competed on this, we can share the story about nightmares we are having trying to go through this. What will Frank do? Because he always approved of having addition to his buildings, revisions, or expansion, except that he had to be the architect. So I always say that I'm glad. Also, all the master's buildings I had to deal with, as Mohsen said, all of them are dead by the time I started to work. And as you can see, it's very diminutive, and one of the challenges is that how to have its own presence and how to have its own sense of monumentality while it is small. And without being derivative, without being, in fact, a very different building from Frank Lloyd Wright. And the module of this center is determined by the projection of a spacing of a pergola, as you can see, which connects the original Martin House to the outbuildings. In this way, the new building relates to the garden and landscape, which is alternatively called a garden pavilion. And then reconstructed pergola is newly resonant because it's actually fairly controversial in terms of historic preservation to reconstruct something which is already destroyed. In this case, that was the case. So in a sense, it has a double duty of relating it to Martin House, but also giving up a meaning to newly reconstructed. So in a sense, this project has reconstruction and reframing, reassessment of both historic structure, contemporary structure. It always had to have a double meaning of making it read as its own contemporary pavilion, but at the same time being a part of historic fabric, but also a part of this entire process of historic reconstruction. The inverted hip roof of Visitor Center refers to the form of Wright's building while simultaneously marking its distinctive public function, which is the opposite of hip roof. And also, it has a different kind of sustainable principles in consideration, not for contemporary environmental concerns, but for his interest in technological innovation. I just had to be imagining if he were alive, he would be using geothermal heating, displacement ventilation, hiring Matthias Suhr, minimizing long-term energy costs, perimeter mullions are structural. And these are actually infrastructure elements he's already had in Martin House as piers where all the, before the electricity was a gas and air system, ventilation shafts, and all of that was embedded in this particular pier system. And he really had infrastructural point of view. Structure is all steel, had a cantilever as an element. And what's proposed was I wanted to actually make it as a fiberglass roof, but it was very expensive. But nevertheless, it's actually a series of layers of insulation as a roof. And it appears as if this little building is only supported by 4 piers. But in fact, it's a bit of a trick because lateral loads are also distributed by the very narrow columns, only by 2 by 4. It's embedded in it. I call them mullions, like mullion columns. It's embedded into it. So it's a trick of a perception, but I wanted to get this anti-gravity effect out of it, working very much with SRM Bill Baker to kind of achieve this visual effect, which again makes it look a little bit more monumental in terms of its own size. So that's actually an issue to deal with that. And of course, transparency is the opposite of opacity of a building. And interior of Martin House is amazingly rich, but it has many, many shadows and shades of gray, and this is actually imbued with a bright light. And the latest is actually we have only doing 1 story, and we're using a reflective material, which is coarse as if a brick, to have a reflection of Martin House in the back wall. So this project started to broke the ground. It's under construction, but as we go through, we're actually going through design change as we go through in terms of slightly different character of what it used to be and what it was. Next one is dealing with Marcel Breuer, which is 1951. It was his house. He designed a house in New Canaan, Connecticut for himself, his family. He lived there for more than 25 years. But in last 50 years plus, it has had 1 expansion and many, many renovations. And this is a house what I call orphan Breuer house, because it's never been really part of Opus because of all the changes that has taken place. And then it doesn't even get, it gets excluded from an official list oftentimes. And it was in a way this particular orphan state that we had little sympathy about. And it's like a puppy with a perfect pedigree, but it was just not perfectly groomed or something. It wasn't quite loved. So when I came upon this house, it was brought up by a developer, and a plan of McMansion to replace this house was already drawn up and filed. My client, who saw a value in this house, put a stop demolition order, and just in time to save the house from its demise. So this is what it is. Now, ironically, after we started renovation, Docomomo wrote me a mean letter asking me why I'm destroying the house. In order to restore the house, we had to replace a foundation that was made out of cinder blocks. The house was taken apart, repairs made, and put back together. And Docomomo was asking all sorts of questions. But then my question to them was, where was Docomomo when we really needed them, when the house was under threat for demolition? So when I wrote the letter back, I just never heard from them again. So it was actually a very interesting thing about hypocrisy of preservation. This is the original plan. And addition was made, like this little square thing, this square here. This was addition, which is imitation of a block, and it was not in a very good shape. It really had to be dismantled, but it looked like it really expanded to make it into a Breuer with steroid in there, so it didn't quite work. And it was a very difficult strategy, and we do need a larger family house. This is a 1-story house, and the family who bought it had invested quite a lot. And my issue is how to work with historical icon, but make it a functional house. And at the same time, give it its own presence, but make it not overwhelm it. And a strategy is to really slipping a stair through existing opening, and then connecting it to a new geometry, which would be a similar geometry Breuer would use, but the stair really clearly indicates it's a very separate new construction. It's a glass stair, it's transparent facing Breuer house, and then translucent against the public entry to connect to gives them privacy. And also, since new addition doesn't have interior stair, they have to constantly negotiate going back and forth. Landing is always here. So in a sense, from basement, they have to land there to go up. They have to go there. So every day, they really have to negotiate new and old in a daily life, which is kind of interesting way of negotiating between historical artifact versus a new one. And we have worked with gradation of materials such as glass with different transparency and translucency to work with conditions of privacy and environmental concerns. And also is a way to diffuse the heavy and solid effect of this particular addition. And also a cantilever on top and extreme cantilever is proposed again to diminish the idea of a presence in its ground. So this is actually the way skylight was added, in a sense, to new house as a connective thread to the new building, so that there the relationship is negotiated on a ceiling plane on the roof instead of walls. Because when you look at the Breuer building, it's really the walls are the elements which really makes distinct characteristic of his building. So it is, in a model, it's a very large building, but what we try to do is to use diffusion, elemental transparency, different type of reflectivity to reflect the trees and nature in the site, so that in a way the elements of a material is much more, in the background compared to the solidity of a stone or Breuer building. So in a sense, it's opposite of what I did to Frank Lloyd Wright. My building was small and tried to give it a monumentality. This one, my addition was big, but by being big and making a background to give a dignity and monumentality to original Breuer house. So this is under construction. This is actually, so in a sense, it's grounded. It's much more solid building, in which case addition is much more hovering over. So this is kind of design strategy of issues to work with it. Another project which I'm working with issues of scale is this tiny little pavilion in China, which was completed last fall in Jinhua Architectural Park. Ai Weiwei is an artist Beijing, was a master planner. He contracted 17 architects from all over the world and also China to do a little pavilion each. We showed up for a symposium. We were just given a red box. It looks like a ballot box, a communist ballot box, and we just picked it. And then we were given the site in a program. We had no choice. And my project is here. It's a newspaper cafe here. Ai Weiwei has a museum. I think Herzog Dumeron has a little bit of a pavilion there. And this is old city of Jinhua. And this is a new city Herzog Dumeron has done master plan for. The strategy is Ai Weiwei. His father is a very famous poet, and he's from this city. And the governor asked him to do this work. And also, I really have to say issues of when you decide to work in China, when not to. In this case, it was very strategic. Ai Weiwei said to us, "You guys, you should work with us, because if we don't do a park, they'll just build up the edge. But if we do a park, the land will be given to the public. This will be the first instance in China. Government will invest to build a park, and then whatever 17 mini-star architects will help to make this happen." So we were skeptical, but at the same time, we thought that's actually a very good idea. We learned later that there aren't really any other park which people can really use, meaning sit and get into, and then that all the pavilions are accessible to public, and this is for everyday people. So in a way, we actually thought that's actually a very good idea to participate. And at the same time, it's a very regional city. This is 2 hours south of Hangzhou, about 4 hours drive from Shanghai. It's a tertiary, fourth-rate city. And in my opinion, as you can see, I was working in Buffalo, New York. I saw a project in Syracuse and Paul, Minnesota. There's something in me that says that if we were to invest as architects, it's critical that we engage with the regional cities. I mean, especially in China, because there are propaganda going around about architects should not work with this particular regime, but people are people. And when we worked with this governor, he was very much committed, and in 4 years, they actually figured out how to build it. It was amazing interaction, and in essence, I think architects, we do have to make a choice of when, how to intervene, in a sense, is for us, like, towards a state of democracy. If that's possible, I think we should participate in it. But again, we had to make that particularly very difficult discussion and choice and so forth. My project was Newspaper Cafe, and in history of China, there's a history wallpaper. Before printing was available, papers are displayed so that people can read it. They still do that because many people are too poor to buy papers. And also, the newspaper stands, as you can see, in a little corner, used as a propaganda material right there. In Beijing, it broadcasts a lot of communist propaganda. And so it was a very strange project, even though it's very small, as you see in the folded plane, to work with. It happens to be right at the entry of the project. And it's also a small cafe to sell ice cream or tea, a place of gathering. Surprised, because that's not really an encouraged activity, but it was okay for people to come together. So in a sense, it's a very conflicting state in which one would want to do something, but not completely with the party policies, for example. It's an amazing place of discoveries at the same time. Proceed with caution is what we came up with. So the entire building is made up of a module for a newspaper, regional newspaper, but what we did is actually it's slightly better proportion, meaning like more generously proportions, meaning that it provides for future display of Western newspapers. And these are small details that they embedded in the wishful project as such. And whenever I try to use the word freedom of media, we're like, no, you can't do that. And when I gave for presentation to the government, they loved it because it's a great propaganda. We can display more than 1,000 newspapers. They said, we are 1,000 communist newspapers from all over China. It's the only place. They got all excited. So my word, freedom of media, is always displaced to the word of propaganda. But I thought it's just a matter of time, and they were able to allow to build me this particular project. And also, displaying it kind of gives activity to people and so forth. And this is what was built. You can see it is a park designed by Ai Weiwei. All the 17 pavilions are built. Last fall, I was there for opening. It's a very rough construction. That's where the China is, and you really have to work with that. And this was opening day. And the people from farmers and students, and they all came. And they're busy putting newspapers in, cleaning up the facade and so forth. And also operators are working together here. And that's the completion of it. Again, compared to a lot of projects I work on, it's a little bit rough, but also there's a very interesting project for me. And one of the reasons is that because of the scale of a newspaper, you can't tell how big this building is. And again, it has this strangely monumental quality, although it is a very, very small building. And it does have its presence, and it's kind of interesting for me always to have this issue between size and scale and issue of monumentality to have a solution of some civic cause. And the kids are walking through it, people are just using it all the time, and then sometimes the papers are displayed, some are not, used just for follies and so forth. That's okay. Second set of issues I like to talk about is issues of suspension, issue of displaced module, which also relates to how to work with small space to kind of expand the module of it. There's a small retail shop in Soho, which has a contemporary glass interior liner. And it's a restored facade of 1852, really has a historic significance because it's a part of a fabric of the west of Soho, so we had to respect it, restore it. And the details of it, which has a glass liner inside of it. And it creates a ephemeral internal envelope that draws passers-by from a street, with its micro-louvered film that switches between visible and invisible. In this time, glass acts as a medium to transform the perception rather than as a material for physical separation. This green box, which acts as a transaction area, hangs from a ceiling. A counterintuitive strategy to insert a large volume enhances the effect of suspension in a small space. This is a house in upstate New York, in house in Chatham. It dramatizes the relationship between building and landscape in its interplay of two volumes. It has a very large volume on the top, which is the bedroom, and then a glass volume at the bottom, and then housing a garage on the back. On upper level, bedrooms are organized around the perimeter, capitalizes the views and light, and are reflecting the less public programs, in contrast with the extensive glazing of lower level and response to a precise position of occupants within the house. The upper level is clad in recycled aluminum foam used for industrial acoustic purposes, which captures a dapple pattern of sunlight in the surrounding forest, reflecting the movement of the sun over the course of the day. With time, the aluminum will develop a patina, making visible the effects of weathering. Transforming a humble material into something ethereal through more tailored detailing is a data pragmatism tactic that achieves perceptive effect. And I have to say, this is an art dealer. He does collect data objects as well. This is architecture that ignores kind of iconography, but instead focuses on fundamental nature and quality of materials themselves. The pure nakedness of materiality provides an autonomous narrative instead of a borrowed imaginary in iconography. It's in construction right now. So it has a pivot between the concrete wall, which is a side wall, and this volume, which actually really in one line, kind of linear, pivots between what's transparent and what's heavy and opaque. This is the last project about this issue of suspension. It's a competition of finalists for Salzburg Strambrenner housing competition. It's on a cliff in Salzburg, which is right back of where the music festival and all this takes place. It's a very strange site because, in fact, it faces north, which is the most undesirable location for any housing. So we had to do a lot of studies to locate volumes so that sunlight is maximized. This is a very cool climate, and in a sense also historic issues of historic building of Salzburg, and working with more of a smaller scale community which is surrounding it. So this is a plan of it. I will kind of go through the project, and I think I can, and it also has 17 unique building types which is embedded into housing itself. It has this kind of sustainable strategy. The unique cliff of the Salzburg Sternbrauner site provides the inspiration for a design strategy of interdependence between nature and the constructed environment. The hybrid housing scheme is composed of 2 horizontal strata, sky dwelling and city dwelling, and 5 distinct open spaces that connect the separate precincts of a design. It has 17 different unit types to offer a variety of lifestyle. The sky dwelling hovering over the site responds to the natural landscape. The city dwellings on grade engage the urbanity of a surrounding neighborhood. The luxury units in the sky dwelling are suspended high in the air, close to the sheer face of a cliff, while the city dwellings are built around courtyards, gardens, squares, and streets. Most units narrow in depth to allow natural ventilation and to maximize available light have both city and cliff views. An architectural exhibition space and postgraduate study center are housed in new and historic buildings on the site. The 5 types of open spaces draw from the urban structure of Salzburg, where buildings are interconnected by open spaces at various scales. 2 city dwellings frame a plaza. The western city dwelling block has a semi-private courtyard, while the east city dwelling opens onto a private garden overlooking the forest. A promenade, which is this, parallels the east-west orientation of a cliff, and the square in the eastern planning area incorporates a historic brewery. Various sustainable strategies and materials maximize energy efficiency, innovative glass with high-performance capacity for energy and sun control in the facade of apartments, windows fitted with internalized shading devices, a pattern of fitted glass of various densities that assure privacy and energy control. The facade treatment of a city dwelling has regular configuration, the pattern of a sky dwelling facade, discernible only from a distance, simulates the pattern of a cliff. The sky dwelling is supported by a diagrid structure which combines structural truss and structural skin in a diamond-shaped matrix that minimizes material use and weight. So this is a kind of a competition scheme. We didn't win it. We were one of the finalists. But at the same time, as we all know, competition wins and loses. But we really use that to actually advance our research and understanding of different strategies. So we take this opportunity as a great opportunity for research to perhaps come up with a different type of housing type. And I would talk about two projects, which is also one in Beijing, China, which we bowed out of, and then one ongoing in Taiwan about flexible and new type of housing that is really in emerging and, changing cultural styles. This is actually a housing project where Yang Ho Chang was a master planner. They selected us, Rafu Meotra, Yang Ho Chang, to come up with a different housing type. It's a hybrid typology for multi-generational or multi-family or even multiple use, meaning combined work and living and having multiple family living together. And the proposal is to come up with a very unique building type. And we actually try to look at this idea of combining work and life. And also the idea of having more of a daylight, because some of the housing in Beijing are quite severe in terms of lack of light and lack of ventilation. But it is a dense dwelling, but having different daylights and different open spaces and windows and openings can actually work in terms of geometry and new housing type to work together. And these are the kind of layouts we have come up with. And different courtyards, inspired by Chinese paintings, and different openings and facets we were able to introduce. And these are some of the study models that came up with interior concept. But the problem is that the only thing they really wanted were McMansions, which looked like something built in California. So three of us basically said we can't work like that, and we kind of had to bow out. So this is one of our stories. This is a project in Taiwan we are working with. It's a very different one. And again, Taiwan is interesting to me because also in a bit of outer regions in terms of China, as you have heard, it's kind of trying to go through independence or non-independence, but it's very, very separate, interesting culture. It has many aboriginal tribes and very beautiful nature, tropical. And the red dot is our site. It's a villa project in which they invited 10 international architects and 10 Taiwanese architects. We have 20 sites to do 20 prototypes, and each one of us has 20 different sites, and each site has about 8 to 12 units of development for villas. So this is for developer. And also it's a site in which the view is very important, and sunlight. Some of them are very severe sun. And also idea of providing shade and ventilation, again, is very important. And one of the issues of dense urban housing in places like Taiwan and perhaps all of China, but especially in Taipei, where many people will be buying villa, this is a much more luxurious project, but I would say upper middle class, not the super luxurious villas, is really breaking down programs to make a flexible building type by calling it flexi-villa, and not of an icon of a Western house, but coming up with modulation of different housing type and combine them on the site so that a lifestyle can be very different, similar to the other one, multi-generational, multi-families, different relationships, the kids are growing up. When I talk to people, kids in Taiwan, they said, we want to live with the parents, but at a nice, great distance, and they need privacy. So this is a kind of house for you. You have a nice garden around it. And this, also the layouts you saw previously, is also permutation how these different elements and modules can work in a particular site we are given. Basically, it has 3 different units. Main house unit, which is the biggest rectangle there. And then a 2-unit house and single unit. Grandparents' house, 2 kids and parents. Or it could be 2 guest house. And then it could be another family, married couple, and so forth. So we have different scenarios in which multiple number of people can actually live together. And the idea is also to inside-out inverted courtyard house in the perimeter of these units engage with different type of landscape. And people in Taiwan, they are great gardeners. They love gardening and keeping them busy and then keeping them planted and orchids and vegetable gardens. And that's one of life also promotes health, ecological lifestyle at the same time. So this is kind of ongoing project. I go into this area which show 2 projects which I'm dealing with in the narrative of artistic and literary origins. One is Paul Park Visitor Center in New York. The other one is Arbor's Pavilion in Connecticut. This is a commission by New York City Parks Department in Grand Concourse in Bronx. It's a community education facility, and it actually has 80-year-old bandshell here, and this is a house Edgar Allan Poe lived. It was his last house. He lived between 1846 and 1849. This is where he wrote Annabel Lee, and also where his wife died. So it has a lot of history. I think not too many people know that this house exists, but it kind of looks like this. It's a cottage. It still has Edgar Allan Poe's original furniture in it, and some of the artifacts still remain. But it's a kind of elegiac cottage because of the history of death of his wife, and soon after he left this house, he died in Baltimore, or there's a mystery about exactly how he died and where he died and so forth. So this is a community center. And as you can imagine, I had to dig rid of Frank Lloyd Wright, and Marcel Breuer is something else. Edgar Allan Poe is completely another story. In terms of nightmares, this is really nightmares, reading his stories. And the danger is to not to make it a Halloween central, so to speak, because all the will be very popular with kids. But then also, it's a plan. I really thought very carefully about plan of it. It's kind of broken volume. It's bent together. In a sense, it's actually 2 volumes slipping out of each other. And then it really to express the state of flux, characteristics of many of Poe's stories. 2 parts not only represent the opposing orientation of sight, but what poet and scholar Daniel Hoffman considers the dual aspects of Poe's work, the grotesque, or stories of horror that arise from ordinary circumstances, and the arabesque, or stories of imagination in dreamlike circumstances. So these are actually issues of 2 arabesque reading up to this actually faces a Poe Park in this ordinary thing. When you do the work for Park Department, it's really what they want is a nice big bathroom. That's what they're really for. So, and then garden used for gardeners and all that facilities. So in a sense, this is extra, but working with historical society to really make it a very interesting work. And uncanny in terms of really having a slipping through. This is from Grand Concourse, slipping into this exhibition space, having a view, and slipping out. And this is facing a big park. So it's kind of mysterious to what this volume is about. And then you find this, again, another small compressed space, all painted white, can actually look rather grand. And it has this little bent quality in what is also illusion. It really doesn't know, people don't know exactly what kind of shape of it, what kind of creature it is. A basement this was existing public toilet, which we had to renovate. It was very scary. It really was Edgar Allan Poe novel here. I can't believe people built underground public toilets, but they did. But we had to renovate it into a Parks Department facilities here. And exterior is flat with a black slate, which is detailed like roof shingles, again, to give idea of uncanny. It's a traditional New England material, but very durable, in fact. To do a Parks Department project, we have to go through what you call batting tests by the commissioner. Commissioner Andre Beneby comes and he hits the building to make sure it doesn't break. And that material actually went through the testing fine. It was like broke his back, in fact. So this is kind of an interesting, more a dark building, but also it has a lighting right beneath the alcove to give an uplifting effect. Also, it has a metaphorical idea of looking ravens. There's a Parks volunteer group, which is they are called Ravens, and Ravens is actually written not here but in Manhattan, but it's very closely related to history of Edgar Allan Poe, in fact. This is a mural, pixelized mural. In mosaics, we are proposing in bathrooms. It's a very inexpensive way. Can you tell who it is? Yes? So this is a way for us to let people hallucinate without using drugs. So I think, in fact, I think we are really trying to say, like, save the kids from drugs, let them read Edgar Allan Poe. They have better trips that way. So we're trying very hard. The next one is this was dealing with literary legacy, interpreting his stories and characters. This is really about Albert's, and it houses Joseph and Annie Albert's. Joseph's glass paintings, furniture, not about paintings, and Annie Albert's textile. It's a pavilion proposed outside of Albert's Foundation in North Haven, Connecticut. And this is an exhibition I did in Cooper Hewitt Museum, which has displayed, combines both his work and Harvard's textiles. This is some of them actually prototype of Harvard dormitories by Albers. And long bar is what we are proposing as a pavilion. This little U-shaped thing is, in fact, what is existing foundation. And this is a long glass bar which has a series of volumes which is climatically controlled differently for furniture and textiles, some of the paper, and so that they become archives and also study spaces at the same time. And what we're trying to do is, in terms of perception, is that to interpret Joseph Albert's interaction of space in which you have illusion of a planes in different depths. So literally, we actually have these volumes at different depths, so that idea and feeling is that people are traveling through these liminal zones between a face of canvas in between series of planes of his colors, and literally translating it. But also climatically, where the passage is semi-conditions, whereas all the white volumes is completely conditioned. So in a sense, a balance of nature and artifice, and perceptually, architecturally, it gives this kind of illusion of distinctly nothing but the Albert's building type of identity between what's opaque and what's solid and what's transparent through this. So this is a kind of liminal zone that we are very much interested in. Series of textile research, what I talked about, started with Japanese textile exhibit in Museum of Modern Art, where I designed exhibition itself. I got to be familiar with the fact that textiles are made manually, mechanically, digitally. Some of them follow very ancient techniques, as this one, and some of them are industrial materials. They are equally interesting. And I'm doing research now. I've been forever writing this book called Textile Tectonics and Architecture, which had to stop because of my chairship. This is a research I'm going to continue after I step down. But idea is, it's taken a long time, but it's very fascinating, in fact. And idea is that textile tectonic is very few techniques you can do in three-modal projection manually, mechanically, digitally. Only other one is actually in ceramics. It's universal, meaning you can see in all over the world in different mode of production, and it's easily accessible because of that. And at the same time, this is another exhibit I did for Cooper Hewitt Museum, in which I was also an advisor, and some of you are part of this exhibit because Sheila Kennedy's work was there. And really looks at advanced technology in textile production, which is probably one of the most advanced from, this is a little from bag, very against bears, so that you can keep food in there so the bears don't attack your lunch. And from incredible ropes to gears, felt gears, and so forth. Or the climbing ropes, which is amazing technological advance. Or athletic gears. They are all fiberglass made gears. And what you see here is carbon fiber a device which athletes, disabled athletes can actually use for running. And there's been a story that some of them, their device is so good that they got disqualified because their record was faster than people with legs. And so there's a very high performance called cheetah, in fact. And all these amazing boats and bicycles, medical devices, and also aeronautical space age thing, and great number of different kind of gloves to hold on to glass or sharp objects to hot objects and so forth. Many layers of textiles are used for safety, in fact, and spaceship. And something like embroidery as opposed to weaving or knitting is used because it as a free-form area. This is very traditional English embroidery lace, and it's creating something like a shoulder patches. I think some people are having shoulder problems there. For surgery, so you can actually patch the, some parts of tendons and muscles together, which is advanced, really advanced medical technique, but using a very traditional technology in textiles and so forth. And this is something which is microfine weaving. It's a spinning. It's called spinning, like a spinning of spiders, so that you are creating a mask to prevent you from going into some area with poison gas and so forth. And that technique can be used for filter air in environments against a toxic gas or, chemical attacks and so forth. So this is a kind of really interesting area of technology. Some belt gears, which also lubricates, as also it's very silent and quiet. And this is like a bag to carry construction materials in seaports and so forth. So it's not only construction materials, a large heavy object for transportation and so forth. Collapsible booms for uses in military as well as in outer space use. And some wings and so forth, and something like this sail, which is woven in combination 3 textiles, carbon fiber Kevlar, and fiberglass. And this is a kind of, he's checking the mechanics. It's actually laminated, not woven condition of overlaying of different fibers that actually goes through. Or multitasking material for geotechnical textile for landscape architects, which prevents erosion but promotes irrigation. It's multitasking kind of fabrics at the same time. So in a sense, textiles are amazing resources to think of future for architecture in primitive huts like this to allow ventilation, but also prevents from rain to come in, or like techniques of weaving by fishermen to have this kind of bucket full of dome kind of a fishing net type of construction. It's really, this idea of high-tech and low-tech collapses very easily in this particular area. And this is just an example of maybe using this textile tectonic to use for addition of a house. This was Paul Rudolph's house. Oops. And I did a guest house first, and family actually grew larger and did this addition. And in particular, I like to talk about this particular addition because it is a small one. And again, similar strategy of regenerating Rudolph House, but being slightly different but similar building modules. Its addition is this. And it's connected by an exterior pergola, which is what it looks like. It's glass and concrete as opposed to wood construction of Rudolph. And in particular, the stair is a fiberglass stair made by Eric Gertz of Bristol, Rhode Island, who builds America's Cup's boats. And one of the problems with this climate, this is in Florida, is that it has to withstand UV. This is UV-proof fiberglass. And also it has to be light and also waterproof and hurricane-proof. And stainless is not stain-free. Metals rust because of salt. So this particular one was built with layers of fiberglass, like I call it panini, like, layers. One treads and rides over 7 layers, landing with 9 layers, kind of mushed together. As in safeguard, this is actually used for bulletproof wall inside. And if you look at in the layer, you can see how different weaves are combined to distribute weights laterally instead of having to be a thickness to prevent it from it. So something like this fiberglass bridge in Maui, Hawaii, can be built in one piece and brought in. And then this was extreme textile prototype. I worked with the same boat builder for interior boats, which is something like this Kevlar. And this was how it was built in boatyard, built in one piece to Florida. This was only about less than 300 pounds. 2 people can carry it very easily. Different tectonics. It really is built expressing a building by fiber and suspended by quarter-inch rods and kind of a floating in terms of something. The last thing of fiber experiments is that shelter, refugee shelter, as Shigeru Ban talked about, the fact that you can't bring in value material. In this case, the remnants I got some time ago from Patagonia to weave together some of the shelters. And this is a more theoretical project and working together some of the siding ideas with lycra and spandex and then polar fleece, weaving through chicken wire. And coming up with a drawing to distribute because people have difficulty reading. Not everybody speaks the same language. So visualization and technique combined with this shingled textiles, and then something like a hammock in which that can be a habitation, and also it could be a place for kids to feel warm, and combines techniques of weaving, but also weaving or textile production is a community building act, and it also has a healing quality, so there's something, again, after I step up a chair, something I look forward to working on it. The last one I like to talk about are the infrastructures, sustainable buildings, which is more technical, and how to deal with them. And in this case, the Syracuse project. I show you 2 projects in Syracuse and 2 projects from St. Paul, Minnesota. So you can now understand I'm a regionalist, uncritical regionalist. And this is Syracuse. It's probably worst location on campus. It's the back of a loading dock and where the garbage dump is between School of Architecture and School of Engineering. And the only virtue about it is that Dean of School of Architecture looks down at this place and they said we have to have somebody to do better design building here because he has to look at it. So there's a selection process and so forth. And then I was selected to do this first. And it's a very tough site, again, very limited. And idea first was to build, it's actually for material science and Center for Excellence in Energy and Environmental Systems academic campus. Idea is to build on top of this existing engineering building, but they didn't have enough load allowance to be able to build it. So what we did is we scrambled together 3 projects with material lab here and new classrooms and then original Center of Excellence. And we actually had material testing area too. So we put together 4 aggregates or programs together to build this building to put it on top of it. So as you can see, it's kind of aggregate shape. And that go quickly, and so in a sense, it's very industrial. It's very inexpensive, using metal-clad panel which has intrinsic insulation in it. And one of the things is because it's shiny, dean's office is here, so it kind of bringing nice natural light. It got cleaned up, so it's quite happy with the results. But also it kind of makes a very different vocabulary and then really transforms the perception of what this space used to be like. So it's kind of becoming a new gateway. And in a sense, I metaphorically call it a diamond in a rough, where this building becomes a center for material sciences, in which architecture students and engineering students use the labs and testing labs together and study together about testing and simulation materials and environmental sciences and so forth. And Syracuse Center of Science, this is actually another competition. As a result of that, their center had to move to downtown Syracuse. This is a contaminated site. And also to university has this corridor which they established in which the Center of Excellence is located there. It's a Center for Excellence for Environmental Science. And in it, it really is about study of scientific ideas. And it's a conglomerate or federation of about a dozen universities, corporations, career air systems, and so forth to really study the effects of climate and also indoor air quality. So it has both outer, exterior climate studies and also studies of environment itself. And building, because of what it is, we had to deal with phenomena. They are all invisible phenomena that had to do with heat conduction, convection, stratification, evaporation, transmission, heat radiation. They are all not readily visible phenomena, but they are the most critical principles if we were to study energy studies and effects of energy in buildings and cities and so forth. And these are different approaches that we actually came up with. And these are the labs on top. Indoor air quality lab. Interstitial is mechanical spaces. They can bring in different type of air conditioning systems. And beta labs is conditioning where they are testing humans about comfort level, which is, this also has psychologists from Cornell is involved, issues of sociology, quality of air, and so forth. So this is what the scientists call this holy grail for environmental sustainability, is to increase productivity. If they can prove in metrics that impact natural ventilation, natural day, natural quality, efficient use of energy, all that, in fact, how do I say, contributes to improvement of quality. And if people can produce better, then there's a real incentive in businesses to invest in these sustainable strategies. This is very desperate because it's America. We don't have policies or anything. But internationally, this has actually been proven to be a very powerful thing. So this is a holy grail that we're after in developing this particular thing. The tail of the building is more of a hard science lab spaces. In material testing, again, a real certified testing labs. They have water channel. And also idea is to make a visible, more public lab so that people can come and visit and see what's going on. And it's called Living Lab because you could change the systems and really see how it operates. These are different strategies for sustainability. It's got all the bells and whistles on them. Passive solar strategy, biomass, cogeneration. They are getting a paper pulp from paper company, getting biomass generation, and they're getting paid for it because it's a waste they have to pay to remove and so forth. We have earth stacks, geothermal, so all these strategies coming up. And again, it's a demonstration facility. And idea is to build this building with conventional techniques and conventional materials. And these are kind of goes very quickly. You can see through different strategies for gray water usage, natural ventilation. Landscape architects is Hargraves who are working very much about landscape irrigation, displacement ventilation, and green roof. And again, these are different metrics of how much we can get out of wind turbines. and natural ventilation. So these are the kind of how much efficient this is, and going for LEED. That number we are just saying we have to go beyond LEED. So these are the kind of current metrics we have in terms of this building. I just go very quickly to get to the last one. And so we learned a lot about this particular infrastructural issues of technical buildings, which is really, in terms of working through it, it's vigorous, integrated. We had to have 40 people in each meeting to really go through a lot of things. And I will show last project in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is a very lovely city. And we proposed 2 projects, and really studying the climate and sunshine and warm, it's cold there, and maximizing the daylight, which is important in climate like this, working with Trans-Solar, and then working with this kind of rather robust housing, elderly housing, offices and parking project to come up with a different type of larger buildings which has pockets of ventilation, community centers, in a sense breaking down massivity of large buildings for this development, which is kind of working with Catholic diocese to make public communal spaces, and some of them are actual chapels, religious spaces, to work through that. And another next one, the last one I show, is really about 3 towers. This is a development on water edge. The city's idea is to build a big wall of buildings to prevent the view. And there's a state capitol. Okay. Yeah, there's a state capitol here, which does have this wonderful radio geometry, which we wanted to enhance, in connecting to Green Kellogg Park, maintaining existing view corridors. But it's a big project, 1 million square feet or something. And then it is to displace existing prison, which I can't believe they built a prison with water view, but that's where it is. So the idea is to displacing it with the office projects. In phase 2, phase 1, and a new contemporary museum, which is working with Walker, Minneapolis, and so forth. So, and again, similar infrastructural issue of different type of programs and so forth. It's kind of scales. So these are big projects for us. This may not go through. It probably won't go through, but it's a great for us to study. And I say this is, I rather build in St. Paul than Dubai because they really need it. They have a great people, workforce, climate. I really think that there's a certain thing about promoting different regions in the United States and abroad rather than just focus on some urban development. I think is kind of interesting. Just to, wish is really to give an access to the water view and water to the community and so forth. So to conclude this, I have to really, this is my last year as a chair, and I really like to say something about the state, and bear with me a little bit speech. In the last 7 years, I was witness to 2 attacks on architecture. The first one is 9/11 terrorist attack on World Trade Center. I only live 10 blocks away. I saw the attacks. My neighborhood turned into a war zone for nearly a year. I literally lived the entire recovery process, which is still ongoing. This attack has to do with architecture being a global symbol of culture. Yet for the victims inside the towers, it took place in the most ordinary and routine circumstance of simply showing up at work one beautiful morning. The second attack took place 5 years later. It occurred within the hallowed walls of Hubbard. It dismantled Woodbury Poetry Room, one of only 4 projects in existence in the United States by Alvar Aalto. How can you destroy poetry in Alvar Aalto? I can't figure it out. It was not necessary. It could have been easily saved. It just was a little interior room. Not only was it a rare complete outdoor interior, but it houses a legendary program in teaching of poetry at Harvard. I still do not comprehend why an institution would destroy its own cultural heritage. It did not kill people, but it kills the spirits. I'm still hoping that with a change of leadership in new administration at Harvard, this precious gem of outdoor room can be put together. This is the last wish of the chair. It's the story about the role of arts and architecture in an institution and its commitment for protection of cultural artifacts for its sustainability and survival. During my tenure as a chair from 2000 to 2008, these two incidents marked two polar opposite directions in architectural discourse. One, the global and spectral rise of status of architecture as civic production, which raised the profile of architects worldwide. The other, the local and institutional survival to reinstate the significance of architecture as a discipline reasserting its major role in formation of culture and civilization, especially at our own doorsteps. That's a very difficult one, as difficult as a global issue. Architecture's ascent in global media is criticized as being a hollow instrument of rabid commercialism, where its role and relevance has been questioned in academic institutions. It is no longer enough just to offer a competent top-tier professional education to our students. The school and the department does have public roles to play, and it is very urgent. These reflections need to be followed through carefully from global and local perspective to make architecture relevant within the discourse at every level, scale, and place. As we witness the collapse of financial systems, acceleration in urbanization, crisis in climate change, political unrest, violence inflicted on humanity, we do need to change the gears to locate ourselves in a different orientation in value systems. We, as a community, should question the current value system assigned to architecture and cities in order to get them off the track of becoming consumer products. Ecological, cultural sustainability can be practiced only if the base or value system includes longer-term performance connected to other infrastructure systems. I would like to make an argument for contemporary architecture to be relevant in the way we need to go forward as humanity. In these instances, it is not only large acrobatic gestures that change the percept, but more likely small twists in the orientation of our efforts, which will cause a large reformation for opinions change as we constantly frame and reframe questions and problems. These include our current students' effort to organize symposiums, work in teen centers, building hospitals in Rwanda. These mean a great deal instead of making big towers in Dubai. Because the civilization is confusion and in crisis, we can mine opportunities. It is not a time to think about the role of architects based on a traditional understanding of model to lament and complain. We are precisely at the time when we can invent our roles. Through internet and social connectivity, even very young architects are able and empowered to do work right away. I believe the most powerful attribute of architecture beyond its functional and fundamental capacity is to reveal through ordinary moments extraordinary effects and changes one can offer to the society. Design is an intelligent and intellectual discipline. By optimizing our capacity as architects and designers, we can offer dignity to each project no matter the size, scale, location, and scope. Our capacity to visualize, envision, and manifest what is still latent is the most powerful tool no other profession can offer. Effect embodies knowledge, philosophy, phenomenology. It organically integrates sciences, technology, text, and sensory environments. Environmental concerns are not mutually exclusive with issues of social justice. These are very, very difficult issues. But architects are naturally gifted at multitasking and capable of connecting the dots to see a big picture. The future role of architects is to become active and effective in holistic engagement with the civilization at large. Thank you very much. Yes, sure. I don't know. Thank you. You said one to at the reception or something. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you very much.
Maybe I think given what Toshiko has presented us with, she's hoping that if you have some contribution or comment or questions, you would make them now, and if not, then we will, of course, continue the celebrations outside. But I don't know if anybody would like to make any comments. One thing that I would say, first of all, thank you again for a wonderful talk and for everything. Specifically on the question of the two attacks, the second attack, which is the poetry room. I think that thanks to your hard work and the hard work of many other people here in the room, I am, I think, very optimistic under the circumstances, and glad to say that Drew Faust, our president, is actually very concerned about the poetry room, as indeed is the recently appointed university librarian. I did see him on Sunday of this week, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if plans are currently underway with your suggestion and the suggestion of others to really do something about the reconstruction of the damage that has been done to the poetry room. But this is obviously work in progress. But I think you have been extremely effective, as indeed you have been in all other areas in the specific area of the poetry room. Would anybody like to make any comments? Or I just feel that it's been such a wonderful, complete scene that it may be a little bit inappropriate to go into details. But if you wish to make anything.
Since they want to roast me.
We will just go outside and celebrate. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.